It's the end of 2024, and you know what that means, right? I've got to showcase my top indies that I played throughout the entire year. And this year, I spent a whole entire year every single week playing indie games and covering them here on my channel. So if you're new here, this is the first video of mine you've ever seen, make sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload videos every single week. Last year, I did do a top indies of 2023 video, but I only started covering indie games at the very beginning of December. So I didn't play as many and I didn't have as much of a curated list as I do here for 2024. And there's plenty of big indies that I did not play, I did not cover. So don't expect to see those here in my list. Expect to see more niche games, you know, the mid-size indies and things like that. This is by no means intended to be serious or a subject of debate. These are simply the games that I played throughout 2024 that I enjoyed the most. So I hope you learn about at least a few games that you've never heard of before and are therefore interested in. And if you are interested in learning more about any of these games, I've covered every single one of these on my channel previously in some capacity. So check the pinned comment below. I'll have links to any of my reviews or coverage that I did for these games. There is one game on my list that is the lone exception that I did not cover at all yet on my channel. So if you're interested in seeing what that one is, stick around to the end as I'll showcase that one last. Now with that said, let's first get into my honorable mentions. Now I have 6 honorable mentions I want to show off really quickly, and then I also have my top 10 list, which will be the bulk of the video. And the first honorable mention is actually an original Game Boy game. It's called Kudzu. This one plays very similar to The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy. And Kudzu you can buy a physical copy for and play it on original hardware. But for you more modern gamers, it's also available through 8-Bit Legit's porting process on the Nintendo Switch. And that's how I played it. And this is a surprisingly fun game for how simple it is. So if you're a fan of the aforementioned Zelda title, definitely check this one out. Then next, I have Knowledge Keeper. Now this one I didn't review, but I did upload my full playthrough since it is a puzzle game. And this is one of those games that I wouldn't necessarily call it a hidden gem, but it's definitely hidden and it's definitely a lot of fun. It reminded me a lot of the Adventures of Lolo series from the NES, and it's that type of puzzle game where you'll manipulate like boxes and parts of the environment and things like that, and you try not to die, and there's power-ups you can pick up and that sort of thing. But this one is really enjoyable, and I highly doubt that there's many of you out there that have heard of this before. So definitely check it out if you like that type of puzzle game. Then next up, I have Attack of the Karens. I adored this game so much when I covered it earlier in the year. And this one's a shoot 'em up that has like some roguelite elements, but it has a lot of humor and some surprisingly great voice acting. Like, this game has no business being as good as it is for as small of a team there was that developed this. Genuinely, this was honestly in my top 10 until the very last second. I remembered something I played that kind of bumped it out. But this one, if you like shoot 'em ups, you absolutely have to play Attack of the Karens. It's so addicting and fun, and you absolutely shouldn't miss out on it. And then next up, I have the Vampire Survivors DLC, Ode to Castlevania. Now this isn't in my top 10 by default, just because it is DLC. And I did not at all like that the Game Awards had a DLC expansion up for Game of the Year. I think that should be its own category, but I don't want to go on a rant. But if you're a fan of Castlevania and you've never played Vampire Survivors, you absolutely need to play this DLC and give Vampire Survivors a try. I think you'll really enjoy it. This DLC just pays homage in such a meaningful way to the Castlevania franchise. So if you're a Vampire Survivors fan, you should play this. If you're a Castlevania fan, you definitely should play this because you will not be disappointed. Then we have 8-Bit Adventures 2, which is a turn-based RPG with a pixel art style that reminded me of my childhood. It plays very similar to the older Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy titles. It's a surprisingly lengthy adventure, and it follows that same kind of gameplay flow and trope where you'll eventually have like an airship and stuff like that. And you might think that this one's nothing special by just looking at it, but it actually has a lot going on for it that makes it really enjoyable. So if you like the older style of turn-based RPGs, make sure you don't miss out on this one. Then my last honorable mention is one I actually just covered about a month or so ago, and that's the Metroidvania title Awaken Astral Blade. Now unfortunately, this one is only available on PC and PlayStation consoles at the time of recording this. Hopefully they'll bring it over to Switch if possible, or maybe Switch 2, and the Xbox consoles, because this is a really fun Metroidvania. And what was really enjoyable to me about it is I really have a great time with combat systems in pretty much any type of video game, but in Metroidvanias in particular, usually the combat is honestly nothing special, but here they have a really meaningful combo system, and the way you can build your character out and chain together attacks made it really enjoyable, and that was the hook that kept me in the game from start to finish and really ultimately pushed me to complete it. They're also constantly updating the game with bug fixes and even adding little bits of content. I don't know how long that's going to carry on for. It probably depends on how well the game is selling, but definitely don't miss out on Awaken Astral Blade. So now that leads us to my top 10 list. Now these are not in any particular order. These are just the 10 games that I had the most fun with throughout the year and I wanted to share. So the first is Pampas and Selene. This is a retro style Metroidvania. I know, another Metroidvania. I love those types of games, who would have thought? But this one was originally developed for the MSX. Now they did expand upon that and improve it to bring it to consoles and also PC. But what I really liked about this one is I liked that you had two different characters you could switch between. And honestly, if you have somebody to play with, which I did not when I covered this, you could play it co-op and you'll each play a character. They are completely different, and the game also forces you essentially to switch between the two and utilize both of them. It's not like they're just copies of one another and they play exactly the same, and that's really what I enjoyed about it the most. They're usually just copies of one another and they don't play any different, but that's not the case here. They each have their own set of upgrades and abilities, strengths and weaknesses, so it really forces you to utilize both of them to the best of your ability to proceed in the game, and I love that about it. Then next up is a classic Vania style title, Carpathian Knight, starring Bela Lugosi. Now this one was so much fun because it reminded me of what I loved about the classic 2D style of Castlevania titles. It has two different characters you can play as, similar to Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis, where you have like a whip wielder and then you have a character with a spear. They play a little bit different, but this one flows in that same linear style where you just go through level to level. It's not a Metroidvania or anything like that. You have the start of a level and then you have a boss at the end and then you'll proceed to the next and you'll make progress that way. There's a lot of hidden collectibles to upgrade your character and there's lore introduced in there. And then having Bela Lugosi be officially licensed in this game, I thought was pretty unique for an indie title. So this was one that I really enjoyed, and if you enjoy the classic 2D style of Castlevania, this is one you shouldn't miss. Then next was a game that honestly caught me so much by surprise, and I'm still playing this one months later. I play it in small little bursts when I'm in the mood, but this is Crossy Road Castle, and this is a co-op platformer that you could play locally or online with crossplay, and it's really simple. Like, you basically move and jump, but the level designs are so intricate and varied across its different worlds that it makes it so much fun. And playing this in co-op, to me, was even more fun than playing it in single player, which was still enjoyable. It probably doesn't look like much, but I promise you that if you give it a shot, you'll have an absolute blast with it. They're always doing events that allow you to unlock time-specific cosmetics. Like for Halloween, there was a Frankenstein skin and a pumpkin topper. And then for Christmas, they had a Santa hat. There was also a turkey skin for Thanksgiving. And there's so many different cosmetics in this to unlock. And I understand that this is kind of like a side game to just Crossy Road, which was popular on mobile. But this one is really, really enjoyable. And if you have somebody that you know to bring along for the journey, I promise you'll have a lot of fun. And at times, you can even grief one another. So if you're the type of player that likes to troll your co-op partners, this is probably a good one for you. And next we have As Libra Gaiden, The Cave of Phantom Mist. Now this one was a standalone game on Nintendo Switch, so it does count as its own game, but technically it's an expansion if you own the PC version of As Libra Gaiden, so there's a little bit of a gray area there on whether or not this should be included and if it's just an expansion, but since it is a standalone game on Switch, which is how I played it, this does count. This is another one that's a roguelite. It plays in that 2D side-scrolling style, and it's sort of like a Metroidvania, but it has like procedurally generated areas and a lot of ways to upgrade, and there's side quests, and there's surprisingly a lot to do and a lot of content here. The combat was really great too, because there's different magic and different equipment that you can upgrade and different weapon types, and it probably doesn't look like much, but I promise this is another one that's a lot more fun than it looks. I covered this one really in depth in my review, and honestly, it's pretty in depth, so I would say if you're interested in this, go check out my review, because I did a much better job explaining it there than I can here, but definitely don't miss out on this one. Then we have Iron Meat. Man, I love this game, and I still play this one as well. This is a Contra style game, so it's a 2D shoot 'em up where you can play as a bunch of different characters. There's a lot of unlockable skins and achievements and things like that. There's varying difficulty levels. And this game, honestly, does Contra better than the recent Contra game did. And I don't say that loosely because I'm a huge fan of the Contra franchise, but this game is so much fun. It is wacky and crazy with some epic boss fights, some really great level design and music. It has an awesome opening cutscene. And if you enjoy 2D side-scrolling shoot-em-ups, you should definitely play this one. It does have co-op, but it is local only. So don't miss out on Iron Meat. Then we have Witchspring R, which is my favorite RPG that I played throughout this year. And this one you play as a little witch named Pieberry. And very early on, she gets accompanied by this bird called Black Joe. And Black Joe might be, like, honestly, my favorite sidekick or companion or whatever you want to call him in any video game in history. Genuinely, he, like, sasses you throughout the entire game. And the dialogue is a mix between cute and hilarious. This definitely has more of a cozy presentation, but it does have a fair level of difficulty as you play through it. I was actually kind of surprised, because when you look at the visual style, you think this is probably just strictly a cozy game, but this is a turn-based RPG with a surprising amount of depth. I really love the visual style, it has great music, the story is enjoyable and kept me interested throughout, and then the combat's pretty fun as well. There's a lot of different upgrade systems and crafting systems and things like that. So this is an RPG that maybe not a lot of people have played or heard of, but you definitely should check this one out, because this was my absolute favorite, and I played quite a few RPGs this year. Next we have the 2D platformer Fallen Leaf. This one at the time is currently only available on PC, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure that's probably going to change, because this game is stellar and I think it did pretty well. But if you're a fan of like Mega Man and the older Mario titles and that NES style of platformer, this one is so much fun. There's several different characters you can play as, there's side quests, a lot of secrets, there's a world map designed like the Mario 3 world map, and this one really tapped into my taste for retro titles, so definitely check out Fallen Leaf. Then we have Arzette, Jewel of Faramore. This one might be my biggest surprise of 2024, not because I'm surprised I like the game, because it's my style of game, even though it was taking inspiration from the really, really bad Legend of Zelda CDI titles, but because I loved it as much as I did. It's a very simple gameplay style, and if you're not familiar with the CDI games for the Legend of Zelda, which you're not missing out on much, that's basically how this plays. But they understood what it was about those games that was fun and interesting, and they understood what it was about those games that were terrible, and they improved every single thing and didn't make the same mistakes that Philips did when they developed those games all those years ago in the 90s. This game has a really great visual style, and it has awesome music. Like, music to me is a really important part of a game, and this one has stellar music. There's a lot of upgrades and side quests, characters to interact with, bunch of different areas you can traverse to, and fundamentally it is kind of like a 2D hack and slash type of game, but it also is sort of like an adventure and a little bit of RPG elements in there as well. And this was one that I feel like was pretty well known when it released, but then kind of fell right off. And that's a shame, because I absolutely love this one. So if this one looked interesting to you, definitely check it out. This is again one that I think is better than it looks through just like a trailer or something like that. Then we have Turnip Boy Robs a Bank. Now, I feel like I'm a little biased in including this one on my list, although I'm not at all overstating how much I genuinely enjoyed this. I played through it again, even though, full disclosure, I was a tester on this, so I played this probably a lot more than the average person would play this in their lifetime, since I was playing it prior to release. But this one is so much fun. And if you've never played the original Turnip Boy game, Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, you should definitely check that one out too. These games are very charming. They have a cozy presentation, but they're hilarious in their dialogue. Like, Turnip Boy games are hilarious, both of them. Seriously, they're completely different games, totally different genres, but you should play them both. So in this one, you're robbing a bank, and what that entails is going in. There's a bunch of different guns and wacky melee weapons you could use. Like, you could slap enemies around with a giant fish, and the sound it makes is absolutely hilarious. It has a pretty intricately designed level, but there are rooms that change each run, so it has some randomization and things like that. It has a really great soundtrack, hilarious story, enjoyable combat, and it just has a lot of charm. So this is one, and I think at the time it's still available on Game Pass, so for Xbox users, you still have a chance to play it. It's probably going to be coming off soon, because I think it's been almost a year that it's been on there. But Turnip Boy Robs a Bank, charming, hilarious, and fun. Check this one out. Then lastly, we have Core Keeper. This is the only game I didn't cover on my channel, and the reason why is because this was one of those games that I just played for me. I play a lot of co-op games off of Xbox Game Pass with one of my friends, and this was one we played and I ended up loving. So I only recorded a tiny bit of footage towards the end of our play session when I was like, ooh, I gotta cover this in a video in the future. And I've been sitting on this footage for a few months now. I think I played it back in like October or something like that. But this is that Terraria Minecraft style game where you build a base and you earn new gear and improve your character. There's a lot of fishing and farming elements and a lot of different things that improve your character. But for those of you that enjoyed like Minecraft or Terraria, you should definitely check out Core Keeper, because this one was so much fun. And when we started out, I was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. But the further we got into it, the more I enjoyed it and the more fun we were having. And currently, we're hoping that they add more content to it so that we can hop back into it. And I'm pretty sure that they're going to. There's a roadmap out there of the content they're going to add throughout the next year or so. So, Core Keeper, this is a fun one if you like those style of games. So that's it, you guys. That's my best of 2024 list for all the indie games that I played throughout the year. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that maybe you learned about at least a few games, or I made you interested in something that maybe you wouldn't normally play. I tried to have some variety here. I do understand that I did play a lot of games that were inspired by Castlevania, so you see that in at least a few titles here. But genuinely, there are so many great indie games out there that are smaller, more niche titles that I know a lot of bigger channels don't cover. So I always enjoy covering those because I want to shine a light on games that not a lot of people have heard of. And that is also including retro-inspired indies. Seriously, there are so many talented developers out there that are still making games for older hardware. I know here I only had a Game Boy game on my list under the honorable mentions with Kudzu, but there are so many NES games. People still develop games for like Dreamcast and Game Boy Advance and stuff like that. So seriously, if you're into retro gaming and you enjoy indie games, you should really broaden your horizon and look beyond what's available on digital storefronts for modern platforms. Because you'll be surprised, there's a lot of games out there that only get physical releases on older systems. And hopefully I can cover more of those going forward in the future. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you feel like there's any lesser known indie titles that, I didn't cover this year, I don't know how many of you watching this have seen all of my videos. Let me know in the comments what your top 5 or your top 10 indies you played this year were. I'm always interested in learning about games that maybe I missed out on. So let me know down below. Hope you all had a happy holiday, happy new year. But until next time, have a good one.